So quick little 30 seconds. So my name is Vishal Gurbuxani, born and raised in San Francisco. Got the opportunity to start the first monetization platform for the smartphone, which is the iPhone back in '08. And then from that point on, sold it in 2010. Then we took another company public, grew that to about 1,200 people globally across 35 countries. Then last October, took some time off. And then this January, me and my business partners, we started an incubator that really focused on how do you take great ideas, put a great team around them, incubate it, help fund it, help do a round, either get them to a Series A or an M&A. That's what we've been doing. We've done about 14 investments, everything from mobile, education, healthcare, advertising, as well as consumer internet. So it's been a great experience. So in terms of some context, what we want to talk about today, I have 30 minutes. I talk fast, and there's a lot of information, so it'll be downloadable as well. But what I like to do in these type of scenarios is just kind of set the stage. What we're going to talk about is like what are some trends, and then from there, where is kind of mobile or the app space kind of moving, and then kind of what's next. And of course, I kind of also focus on monetization too, because that's also pretty important. Sweet. Okay, cool. So kind of kick it off, right? We always talk about mobile. It's going to win, but I think Eric Schmidt said it right? It's already won. Now, from that point on, what are some interesting stats that kind of kicked it off? What did we learn last year, right? If you don't have a mobile site, 46% or say 50% of users aren't going to come back, right? So consumer attrition or growth, consumers are very fickle, so you have to think about user experience. The second thing, this is a new stat, right? 60% of what people search on mobile will actually now lead to a purchase. This wasn't the case in 2008. This wasn't the case in 2010. When people searched on mobile, they just got information, but they didn't actually have an activation on where to put that. 60% of people now are looking basically in terms of, hey, if I'm actually having relevant content. Before, people were just putting in display advertising, but now everyone's realizing with Facebook, with Google DFA, all the ads you guys are getting are actually now being very statistically aligned to your profile and your behavioral interests, both online, on your desktop, as well as your mobile experience. This is also another stat, right? I mean, if you look at all these big companies, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Google, majority of the revenue from advertising is also coming from mobile. This slide actually works really big for brands and also people that are actually thinking about what am I going to do for my app. When a user goes onto their mobile, right, 70% of them are actually going to lead to an action within an hour, right? That's actually very different from how desktop is looking at it, right? If you talk to the Marketos of the world, the Salesforces of the world, it's all about the customer funnel, it's all about acquisition, it's all about lead nurturing. But that's going to be through email, it's going to be through banner ads, it's going to be through other RTB, but how does that all kind of work? And of course, we're in an app retreat. 85% of users basically still kind of focus on the app. And we'll get into why that is over mobile web. So these are some interesting stats here just in terms of activations over trends, right? You're starting to see now in basically 2013 was the peak for smartphone activations globally. We are starting to kind of taper down. You start seeing that spike up again the minute kind of devices also come to near zero in terms of kind of Android cost. You're clearly seeing here Android's definitely taking a global lead. Symbian was in the beginning back in 2009, 2010. I think rather quickly now Android, with all their device penetration, also /fragmentation. I like this slide a lot because it kind of shows you a very cool kind of picture of downloads versus app usage. And it's very interesting to me because my takeaway when I looked at this slide was, cool, social is here to stay, messaging is here. You also have some cool things around kind of music and photo sharing. But my big takeaway is Google here has some of the top apps. They also control the operating system experience, but Apple actually doesn't have anything up here, right? Which is kind of interesting and fascinating. They actually don't have a killer app, if you will, aside from the things that you're just using standard. So in terms of kind of overall revenue, you're finding now start seeing the trend, right? Predictions in terms of 2-3 years, you'll actually now finally see, in-app purchasing becomes the dominant way of people driving revenue, aside from advertising and aside from paid for applications. In terms of kind of what's being downloaded, again, trends, right? So if you have a look at 2011, 2012, you kind of see games, entertainment still being very important, right? Messaging. But what's a big shift now is as mobile becomes more pervasive, you're also now looking at kind of more utility and productivity, right? How can I make this phone now a part of my lifestyle, and what does that really mean? I like this slide because it's a comparison to Google Play Store versus kind of Apple. So in terms of Google Play, right, you're basically looking at people are willing to spend for travel, but personalization and entertainment is something that's kind of different, right? So entertainment's kind of same on Google and Apple. But people are looking at how do I get my phone much more personalized to my interests? And that's going to be interesting to see what Apple does with iOS 8, right? iOS 8, they're actually putting a huge stand in personalization with your custom keyboards, custom notifications, custom events, custom hooks. but the usage model is already there on Android, and people are actually willing to pay for it. And then you flip that now back into kind of what are people willing to pay for on the Apple Store, then you're kind of looking at more lifestyle games, more entertainment, more fun, and education, right? So education's kind of becoming that dominant factor is different on Apple versus kind of that personalization, customization on Android. In terms of overall app stores, apps in the App Store, obviously, both are very compelling, right? 1 billion each. More than that, you'll see now Android will obviously now start taking over in terms of the most apps in the App Store. And then, of course, free downloads still continue to be the driving factor. And as you look at the key indicators, 2-3 years from now, I mean, everyone's going to be really wondering, why do you have a paid app? It has to be very unique in 1 billion plus apps. Why am I paying for this app? I actually like this slide a lot. It actually does a really good job comparing Apple versus kind of Android in terms of being a developer, right? If I'm going to be developing an app and I'm an Android developer, how am I going to monetize it? For Android, we're looking at kind of the freemium models. It's going to be ad revenue, subscription, developer fees, etc. But if I'm in iOS, you're still looking at that very close, tight iTunes account ecosystem where a lot of your revenue is going to be coming from in-app purchasing and also kind of the direct download per revenue, right? So it's a good kind of balance of showing you the difference between those two platforms. Two kind of cool takeaways from this. In one day now, there's more smartphones being activated than kids born. And then 91% of the people in the world now have a phone. So now we're going to switch topics really quickly in a few slides. And I do like the way these guys actually did it. They did a really cool job of kind of explaining the value drivers and shift of mobile. So in the early 2000s, right, people are spending, this is household income, right? And where do people spend? In 2000s, 3% of what people are spending on was just on telephony, right? In terms of just paying your phone bill, et cetera. And now you're looking at today. 100% of a householder's income can all be now spent on your mobile device. Whether it be ordering food, ordering your car, ordering your house, ordering your lifestyle. It's a fundamental shift on how people think of the mobile device, right? In terms of a trend from an app world into now a lifestyle in terms of now actually being completely pervasive into your experience. And that wasn't the case just 10 years ago. So now this also slide's interesting to me because we talked about walled gardens earlier, and now we actually have the new walled garden. The interesting to me now is that before carriers kind of controlled the ecosystem, and the irony and the sad part actually, and I've actually talked about this a lot, is now users actually have control to stop the walled garden, but unfortunately they don't realize it, right? It's all about data, and who owns the data and who controls the data. But every time people talk about it, it's all very theoretical. But if you look at the new walled gardens, it's now the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Googles of the world. Why? Because they need to understand, control the data, and they'll do whatever it takes to do that, as long as they don't cross that gray line. And it becomes very scary when you want to start interoperating between a user experience model, when you're going to Amazon, then to Facebook, then to Google, versus just staying in one exact vertical. And it becomes very similar to what the new walled garden looks like. These are some interesting trends in terms of how companies are actually approaching the two models. So you look at the layer cake, right? Top is the apps, right? Which is what we're talking about. All the way down to tools, app, operating system. Right? So you kind of look at the winners right now in terms of the hardware operating system all the way up, Android and Apple. And then you look at kind of what Amazon and Facebook is doing. They're taking more of that horizontal platform approach, right? And that's how they're kind of encouraging users. And this is kind of a great thing. So if you talk to anyone, what is the golden shrine of kind of the experience of a user in terms of the customer funnel, whatever you're trying to do. And it's really around the attribution, right? How do I know that Trevor basically did something, did any action, whether it be a purchase, an educated experience, whatever it may be, because of an ad, because of an app, because of a text message, because of a banner ad, because of a search. What does that all really mean? And it's really about attribution. And you find that mobile, if you will, or app, if you will, becomes now that key block in terms of all your different experiences, right? So it's going to be your app on your computer, app on your phone, app on the tablet, app in the living room, app on your car. And that's going to now control in terms of your experience. So now in terms of kind of a trend in terms of what's next, right? I found this is a really interesting slide because a lot of the investment community, a lot of kind of the developers I've been talking to, and it's very different from the US versus Asia. People are always talking now about messaging, right? Messaging now becomes the new platform. And what does that mean? It's actually very different in terms of how the US uses the marketplace versus how places like Asia, right? So if you look at WeChat, right? In the WeChat model, just in the app alone, you can make purchases for movie tickets, you can call cars, you can send gifts, you can call our police services, ambulance service, etc. It's a very fascinating shift to think about. Messaging now is becoming a new platform for numerous reasons. One is people understand how to use it. Everyone's used to text messaging. The second thing is it's installed pervasively in multiple types of devices. So you're not in a walled garden anymore. And the next question becomes now, what value-added services are you going to be there, right? So in terms of prediction, it's going to be interesting to see what apps now are being built on top of these messaging platforms. This is also another great channel. So if this is for me, in terms of looking at this, this is a kind of a developer, right? You're a developer, you just want to make an app. How am I going to, where's my money going to come from? So if you're a developer making an app, a lot of your money comes from just making it itself, right? So apps continue to be very expensive to make. You have to hire great engineers, and you truly get what you pay for. The second kind of way of looking at it then is you look at app as becoming your portal, your site, your feature that actually now driving community. And now that you have a specific lifestyle group of people, how are you now going to monetize that effectively? And then your app becomes that channel. So the first thing we talked about was messaging as a platform. The second thing that's going to be interesting now is in terms of the e-commerce, right? Now that you're actually understanding the user, you now have great audience attribution, that you now have an app that actually makes sense and is highly engaging. How do you then monetize that? And this kind of takeaway, so every time I look at trends, I'm like, when is mobile web going to beat apps? Like, when is that going to happen? It's still not here. It's still a very, very long time away. The two big things from this slide is one, experience still matters a lot, and engagement, right? Experience and engagement. The two killer things you need to have a great experience on an app is an engagement and experience. You can't re-engage someone once you close your Safari web or your Chrome browser. Notifications will come out next year, I believe, in terms of a new spec, but you still can't engage a user. If Trevor went to CNN.com on his Safari browser, closed it, CNN is not going to ask him again. Now, in terms of this is also another cool little slide, right? So Google earned 42%, Facebook earns 53%, and iOS basically still gets the most kind of monetization from mobile. And when I look at kind of app trends, you'll now finally, whenever we're talking to developers, brands, companies building apps, everyone kind of always asks us, what app should we be building? And how do we engage this consumer? And the thing that we always tell people now is that the type of consumer that you're now talking to is fundamentally now understood what mobile's potential is. And now, with that new mindset, what is that killer feature or that killer experience you're going to develop in the app world, and how is that going to help? Right? So people look at their phone 150 times a day. And when I look at kind of now, overall trends and overall themes, I think the big things for me, it's like the next mobile platform is messaging. Look at disruption, education, healthcare. There's a lot of cool sharing economies. But for me, the big thing is like, what is the multi-channel app, right? So right now, or the way we look at apps is it's downloaded on my Android device. You'll soon now be downloading your app onto your messaging platform. That messaging platform is installed everywhere. And now that you have the messaging platform installed, now what does that really mean for your app experience, right? And then how do you take that down to the next level? Because communication is kind of a key fact. And then in closing, what kind of is mobile? Because that's kind of been the new shift when I look at 2014, right? It's personalized mass media. You're always carrying it. It's always on. You have billing. You're always looking at it in terms of wherever you are. You have audience. You have social content and context. And now that also can now take your current reality and then add more functionality and more interesting experiences as a part of it. So those are some of the big things I've looked at for 2014. And that's kind of some of the stuff I wanted to kind of share. Thanks. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yeah, some of the actually really cool things I've seen so far in the US mindset, because the US mindset is very different from Europe and Asia, is around productivity. So you're looking at a lot of folks use Skype in real time. A lot of folks are using Yammer and other kind of Twitter type consoles, but there's no easy way of taking that and making that a productivity kind of use case. A lot of the companies we're talking to are really excited about messaging, but they're like, oh, what do we do, right? How do we take that communication that your kids are doing, but now potentially put a game around that? Or people are doing it in a corporate environment and now make that more actionable. And the other big thing also around messaging is security and compliance. If you're looking at enterprise, and then for the consumer space, how do you take the context of what someone's talking about and then potentially adding more value onto that? So if someone's typing, hey, I'm looking at movie tickets, all of a sudden part of your experience is actually now coming, hey, if you're looking at movie tickets, you're something around you right now. So I think it's going to become much more smarter, because what's interesting, right? So when you look at Google as being dominant for intent-based search, just so because you search something on Google, it knows your intent, and because that, it predicts all your outcomes, right? It has a graph to do that. With messaging, it's even better, because now not only do I have your intent, I have your context, and then I have your content, and I have your social graph because I know who you're talking to. So the power, the potential of messaging is huge in terms of activating that for the consumer experience.